Oh my God. Sean Hannity thinks buying the least fuel efficient, oversized SUV is actually doing his part for the environment.
On Tuesday, President-elect Barack Obama won by an overwhelming majority. However, some of the environmental provisions that an Obama administration might support were struck down by voters. In the blue state of California, 2 renewable energy initiatives were defeated. Also, the Rocky Mountain state elected 2 Democratic senators but rejected a severance tax on gas companies. Joining us now is former Ohio Congressman John Kasich, president of North Star Strategies and former president of the League of Conservation Voters, Deb Callahan, and National Review columnist Byron York. Deb, let me start with you. You've been on the show many times talking about energy and environmental issues. Why do you think, in light of our great need here and Democratic candidates getting elected, some of these propositions were voted down?
Well, you know, we've heard Barack Obama say that energy is going to be one of his top priorities. And in fact, those California initiatives were good news. The environmental community opposed both those initiatives that went down because one was poorly drafted, and it was a solar initiative and a solar power initiative. But 60% of the solar producers in California wouldn't have benefited under it. We didn't feel it was good policy. But in fact, California did pass a light rail initiative. So the 2 we opposed went down. One in California, we supported one. So I think that's good news for the Obama administration.
Up on the screen right now, $5 billion to jumpstart natural gas vehicles. Wouldn't that have been a good thing?
Well, what it did is it picked natural, it was, you know, a huge amount of subsidy, picked natural gas over all other forms of subsidies. And I think what we need to see is an energy policy emerge that's going to be balanced, that's going to use a variety of sources of alternative energies and other clean energies. And so we felt that, you know, in fact, these initiatives in California were not what we wanted to support. They're not a balanced energy policy.
John Kasich, in Colorado, there was a vote for tax increases for oil and gas to pay for clean energy. No one's going to vote for tax increases. That's probably what the problem. We're looking at the amendment there right now. People are not going to vote to increase their taxes, even if the end result is good for the environment, right?
Well, I think, Alan, this is the problem. I mean, you have in Colorado, they rejected this tax on oil companies because they were convinced it was going to be passed through to them. And I think also in California, the idea that we were going to impose something on the utility companies made people very nervous. I understand there was opposition from the environmental side, but I also think that consumers are worried that if all of a sudden these things get mandated and they're not reasonable, their energy bills, Alan, are going to go sky high. And this is exactly the kinds of things that the Barack Obama administration is going to have to deal with, the rhetoric of what we want to do versus the impact. And consumers are going to be very, very aware of what it's going to mean in their pocketbook.
All right, so, John, how do you do it? I mean, you definitely know what you want the end result to be, even if it's going to cost you money along the way. How do you convince the electorate to do it?
Well, I think, Alan, that the answer to a lot of our energy problems lies in the private sector, where companies in California like Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia Capital, they are now developing very aggressive programs up in Boston with Rockport. These are companies that are trying to develop battery technology. They're trying to make solar more effective. Hey, Byron, I think it's going to come from there.
Hey, and Byron, look, I'm all in favor of it. I just bought and I picked up my brand new hybrid car this weekend. I got a GM Escalade. Is that making you laugh, Deborah? I own a hybrid Escalade. And it gets double the gas.
It's such an oxymoron. I always laugh at the hybrid Escalade.
Well, why is that an oxymoron? Considering they doubled the gas mileage, they have a new car, the Volt GM, coming out next year that uses no gas. Why would you attack? Why would you say it's an oxymoron when they doubled the gas mileage? Why would you attack a company that did that?
It's a step in the right direction, but to still have an enormous...
Not good enough for you.
It's kind of a gas-guzzling hybrid, but
21 miles per gallon in the city?
Yeah, that's
for a
really
hybrid,
not very
that's
good,
big.
Sean.
That carries a lot of people?
I don't mean to criticize it heavily. I just, you know, we're going to have to do better than that if we're going to really...
We're going to have to do better than that. They have a car. They've already built the technology. It's out next year, Byron York, GM, where I bought my hybrid. And they have a car coming out that is all on electricity, but it's not good enough. And I find this hypocritical. There's a report out today that Barack Obama is considering Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be the head of the EPA. Here's a guy that opposed wind farms outside the Kennedy compound. Here's a guy that flies around in private jets. Here's a guy, Deborah, he owns a caravan. So, you know, now we're going to get lectured on our lifestyle We're going to have restrictions put on business by liberals. Is that going to work for the American consumer?
Well, I think that if there were a Kennedy nomination, I think it'd run into a lot of trouble. But I think you have to look back at this election and say, if it had been decided on environmental issues, which it wasn't, but if it had, it would not have helped the Democrats. Remember back a few months ago when the price of gas was through the roof, the Republicans scored a lot of points with this whole drill, baby, drill thing. And it caused the Democrats to actually backtrack a little bit on the question of drilling for oil and even slightly on nuclear power. This was not an area in which the voters were favoring the Democrats.
Well, Deborah, look, I find it amazing how out of touch liberals like yourself are, because most Americans, when polled, they want to drill now. They want to save money. Excuse me. They want nuclear power. They want more refineries, and they want to end our dependence on foreign oil. And they want energy independence. And they don't care. They understand we can do it and be environmentally sensitive at the same time.
You know what? I think that there's an important debate that we're going to have in this country, but you just talked about half of the equation. I didn't hear you talk about wind. I didn't hear you talk about solar. I didn't hear you talk about geothermal.
I'm all of the above. I want wind, solar, new technology, drilling, nuclear power, and refineries, but we'll first put the first wind turbines outside the Kennedy compound. Is that okay with you?
I think we need a lot of wind turbines in this country, and in fact, I think that if,
we'll put it right up. We'll put it right on your roof of your house. We'll start every.
I'd love to have a wind turbine on my roof.
I'll put it on.
I'd love that.
Wait a minute. Do you own a hybrid?
Sean, we should also.
Do you own a hybrid, Deborah?
I'd be delighted. I'd be delighted to have a little mini hybrid.
Deborah, what kind of car do you drive?
You've asked me that question before. I drive a little Audi station wagon.
I bet you my GM hybrid gets more gas mileage than that Audi station wagon of yours.
How about the fact I take public transportation? I don't even drive a car.
Sean,
How's that?
I
save more than you.
Let me tell you something. The last thing we want is you driving.
Public transportation, my friend. That's where it's at. No gas.
Coming up, we'll have more after the break.